much more I tried to help people with everything that I was doing, that I still felt unhappy. And I know now that I was on what is called the satisfaction treadmill, where we are constantly running and setting goals for ourselves. We achieve those goals, and now we're like, now what? And you keep setting them higher and higher and higher and higher, never really meeting anything, because you're on this treadmill. And so by asking those questions, it basically started me on my path, which started over 10 years ago, where I now know that feeling that something was always missing in my life, and it didn't matter what I bought, what I did, what I earned, what I achieved, where I went, it didn't matter, that I always felt like there was something missing. And that something missing was really my spiritual self, that I was living my life, as most of us here on this planet are living, connected to God. And I use lots of different words for God, source, the universe, the divine energy, like lots of different things. But I was brought up Catholic, always connected to God, although God was kept outside of me. I was told as a little girl that God was a church. And so I always believed that it was separate from me, now recognizing that it is a part of me and part of my spiritual self. And so it was through the practice of meditation, that was the very first practice that I engaged.
Namaste, beautiful souls. I'm Shilpa, and you're tuned into the Omni Mindfulness podcast, a sanctuary for spiritual entrepreneurs. As a holistic mindfulness coach and social marketing strategist, I'm here to guide you on a transformative journey. On this show, we explore captivating stories and provide practical tools that deepen your connection with your authentic self. Through the personal and professional narratives of remarkable individuals, we expand our consciousness and ignite the spark of possibility. Each season, I curate content that empowers you to create a holistic lifestyle encompassing spirituality, mindfulness, energy awareness, and mindset. Join me as we engage in conversations with experts in their respective fields and share solo casts from yours truly, all aimed at supporting you and relaxing, revitalizing, resetting your body, mind, and spirit. I'm your host and the visionary behind Omni Mindfulness. So what if just one story had the power to shift the trajectory of your life? What if you could become an instrument in helping others realize their true selves? And what if your soul's higher purpose lies in experiencing the joy of Omni Mindfulness? Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Welcome to Season 8 of the Omni Mindfulness podcast. During this exciting season, we delve deep into the power of mindset. In October, join us as we explore Happy Mind. Is happiness an inside-out job? We'll explore the concept of happiness from various perspectives, ranging from DNA and brain health to mindfulness practices. Moving into November, it's all about conscious connections. Loneliness can be an epidemic, especially during the holidays. Let's understand the art of forming meaningful connections. And in December, we wrap up 2023 with the theme Embodied Awareness. Discover how to connect your body, mind, and spirit for a holistic approach to life. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations, expert insights, and transformative stories. It's a season you won't want to miss. And up next, Teresa Greco. Teresa is a happiness life coach and the host of a weekly internet TV show called The Steps to Happiness Show with Teresa Greco. She is a 3 times best-selling author, an educator, and educational technology consultant with a master's degree from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. She is an international writer and the editor and senior writer at 2 Canadian lifestyle magazines. As a coach and Reiki master, she does public speaking, holds workshops, and mentors others about embracing, honoring, and loving, as well as celebrating their true authentic self and achieving their own personal happiness and fulfillment. And without further ado, here is Teresa. Welcome, Teresa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited that you're here. And as I just before I recorded or hit record, I was saying that I felt like somehow the universe connected us because I was truly looking for your level of expertise on the topic of what I call happy mind, but it's a much deeper topic than just the mind.
That I believe happiness is a state of being rather than just a state of mind. It's reduced to a state of mind or a feeling that we have, but happiness is bigger than that. It's deeper than that. It really encapsulates all aspects of ourselves. And so that's why I say that it's a state of being, because it's that we are.
Absolutely. And one of the motivations I had behind the mind is I feel like often that is where the more Western conversations start is right now the hype is neuroplasticity and thinking about what our thoughts and thinking level is. However, there's so much more to happiness. And you were expressing just moments ago before I hit record that it's even about our inner growth, right? Our soul.
But happiness, I believe happiness is an innate quality of our spiritual self. So we have our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self. And often the spiritual self doesn't get talked about, doesn't get included, because maybe people still think it's like weird and woo-woo, but it is the energy, the essence of who we are. So that component is within us and within everything. And that energy is what we're connected to. We're all interconnected with that energy. So we can't leave that part out, because then essentially the wholeness that we're looking for really can't come together unless we also integrate that part of ourselves. And so that part is always loving, at peace, and happy. Our spiritual self is always all of those things. So therefore, it is a matter of aligning our physical, mental, and emotional self to that place inside of us that is always happy and happy in abundance. But oftentimes our mental self is not in alignment with that happiness. And so that's why when you said about like having happy thoughts or having a happy mind, is that if you really reflect on the thoughts that we have, the 60 to 70,000 thoughts that we have every single day, often 80% of them negative. So we have a negativity bias. And 95% of them the same as the ones that we had the day before. So just recycling the same negative thoughts over and over and over again until we become consciously aware of those thoughts. Only then can we begin to change them. And then that's where like that neuroplasticity comes in that you mentioned, that we do have the ability to rewire the brain with the thoughts that serve us, by selecting our thoughts instead of letting our mind just run rampant every single day on autopilot, where we're not even conscious of how we're living, what we're thinking, what we're doing, that you arrive at the end of the week and you're like, how did I get here? Or you commute to work and you're like, how did I get here? Because we're just on autopilot. We're just creatures of habit. And it's only until we really make a conscious effort to become aware of what it is that we're doing and thinking and feeling in every moment can we actually start to make changes.
There's so many nuggets of information you shared just now. Like when you were talking about alignment, that alignment is somewhat esoteric in nature for many of us, unless we've been in this space for a while. But once we understand that, once we understand that concept, then it's easier to then recognize, okay, where is this information coming from? Am I conscious of it? And what can I do about it? And that's where the mind connection works. Like you were talking about, yes, now neuroplasticity allows us to recognize we can rewire our mind. But the Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion or culture, I don't want to put the label of religion on it, has given us tools for quite some time now, like mantras. Mantras are to unblock or recalibrate what I call new patterns of thinking.
They're like positive affirmations, exactly the same thing, where we have to recite them over and over and over again. Louise Hay says that if we're going to use positive affirmations, we need to say them at least 400 times in a day. And you're like, wow, 400 times I have to tell myself how amazing I am. Do you know how many times a day we think about our problems or the things that aren't going right? Way more than 400 times when we have a problem, because it's just recycling like this, that the organ, that the brain as an organ just does that because it's constantly looking for threat. It's like a survival mechanism where our brain is actually scanning our environment every couple seconds, looking for threats. It's like, are we safe? Are we safe? Are we safe? Are we safe? So our mind automatically is doing that too, looking for, and that's why there's the negativity, because it does try to help us avoid those negative situations or hurtful situations, but we therefore just keep thinking about them. So it is important that we become aware of what those thoughts are, and then use things like mantras or positive affirmations, repeating them over and over and over again, having the sticky notes like around us in our car, near our workstations, on the mirror when we go to the washroom, is where we're reminding ourselves of our truth, not the lies and the negative self-talk that we've been telling ourselves for years and years and years.
Absolutely. You would laugh. I'll show you after our call. My entire wall is full of post-it notes of different types, whether it's for work related, for project management, or just things that I need to remind myself. Like on the topic of thoughts, just a few days ago, I caught myself in a looping situation. And I reminded myself that this morning I'm going to write down on a post-it note, clear the slate. And that goes so much deeper than what it may sound like. Because for me, it's like, start fresh. The truth.
Yes. And we do need to remind ourselves of the truth, because social media can have us believing certain things about ourselves. And then through the growing up of our life, right? That we come into this world as children, as blank slates, very connected to that love, peace, and happiness. Children exude love, peace, and happiness. But it's only when the world starts to get its claws into us, then do we start to believe different things about ourselves, that we no longer think that we're great and amazing and beautiful and phenomenal and full of like curiosity and endless possibilities, when then and often well-meaning people, right? Our family, our parents, educators, religious leaders, colleagues, friends, lots of different people then start to tell us differently. So for me, it was lots of different things that I said to myself on repeat. I was never pretty enough, never smart enough, never athletic enough, never enough of a lot of different things. And these were all belief systems that I had, that were ingrained deep inside my subconscious, that play like a tape on repeat over and over. Every time I ate, every time I tried something on, every time I looked in the mirror, I was not enough of a lot of different things. And it was only until I started to question those beliefs and thought, well, why do I think that about? Why do I think that I'm not smart enough? Who did that to me? Who said that to me? It was my teachers that said that to me, some like friends at school, or not friends, just like classmates that said certain things to me that made me believe that I wasn't smart enough, but that wasn't true at all. And then the same thing, I'm never skinny enough. Every time I put a piece of food in my mouth, I'm like, oh no, like it's really awful the way that we treat ourselves, and that we're not saying to ourselves how amazing we are and how powerful we are and how creative we are and how incredible we are and how like all the good things that we need to hear, how generous and kind, and whatever it is that you need to remind yourself of, then that's what we need to do on the sticky notes. Maybe it's listening to like podcasts or meditations where it's just over and over and over again. And it's amazing how with repetition, things actually change, because the brain doesn't know any differently. It honestly doesn't. And so whatever information you put into it, it's like a computer program, exactly like that. Whatever you put into it, that's what you're going to get out. So I encourage people to put in the code for the thought system that is going to make them feel good, that is loving and kind to themselves, that's empowering. And that we have to do this for ourselves. No one else is going to do it for us. We can't look to those around us to empower us. We need to do it for ourselves.
Absolutely. And it's so remarkable that so many of the guests I've had who are on this path, I would call it more spiritual path, they've expressed to me that they have felt that way, meaning as women, we are so critical of ourselves. And perhaps it's societal, so it's cultural, but that puts in little grooves that over time, and as you are probably aware, that those thoughts then manifest and become locked as energy in the body. And that is where dis-ease and discomfort grows. And it gets only worse if it's not addressed.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like it's the mind that then creating that emotional upset, and that emotional upset then gets stuck, as you said, as blocked energy. Emotion is just energy. We call it our emotional self, but it is just energy that's being translated as a form of communication that we call emotions. But there isn't, anything like a substance to say, oh yeah, that's, that emotion of anger looks like or feels like that. It's just it's a vibration of energy. And so that's why we have those lower vibrational energies like anger, frustration, resentment, shame, guilt. All of that stuff doesn't feel good at all, but it's just energy that's vibrating at a really low frequency versus the high vibrational emotions that are like joy and harmony and peace and gratitude and all of the amazing ones. So that can get stuck in the body, absolutely, and then manifest as dis-ease, as you said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would love to hear, because the way you articulate all these different concepts, which really resonates with me, and I believe a lot of people that are in this mindfulness space. However, a lot of us came from a story. We have our journey to arrive. And I'd love for you to highlight that yours had a similar path, meaning you had to go through some level of self-realization, so to speak. So, I want others to know that is common, and maybe they're on that path, not realizing, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's a pivot or transition that's occurring.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So basically for me, I believe we all reach those crossroads in our life that force us to take a step back and really reevaluate how we're living, right? And I think for the pandemic did that for some people, forced them to take that step back because their life was turned upside down. Sometimes it's an illness, it's a loss of some sort, it's an accident. It's those moments that it's like, oh, geez. And sometimes the situation has to get so bad in order for us to start making a change. And so for me, it was the milestone of turning 40 that had me taking a step back and saying, okay, well, if I'm at half my life right now, am I happy living the life I am living? Can I imagine living the same life for the next 40 years? Am I living my life's true purpose and full potential? And it was in the asking of those questions where I felt confused, because my life looks perfect on the outside. I had fulfilled all the expectations that culture, society, family, religion tell you need to have a happy life. So beautiful, healthy family, our own home, cars in the driveway, a fulfilling career, lots of beautiful material things, vacations. So if my life looked perfect and I had achieved all of those things, I had checked off all the boxes, how is it that I still felt unhappy and unfulfilled with my life? That it didn't matter how much more education I got, how much more job experience I got, how much more I tried to help people with everything that I was doing, that I still felt unhappy. And I know now that I was on what is called the satisfaction treadmill, where we are constantly running and setting goals for ourselves. We achieve those goals, and now we're like, now what? And you keep setting them higher and higher and higher and higher, never really meeting anything, because you're on this treadmill. And so by asking those questions, it basically started me on my path, which started over 10 years ago, where I now know that that feeling that something was always missing in my life, and it didn't matter what I bought, what I did, what I earned, what I achieved, where I went, it didn't matter, that I always felt like there was something missing. And that something missing was really my spiritual self, that I was living my life, as most of us here on this planet are living, connected to God. And I use lots of different words for God, source, the universe, the divine energy, like lots of different things. But I was brought up Catholic, always connected to God, although God was kept outside of me. I was told as a little girl that God was a church. And so I always believed that it was separate from me, now recognizing that it is a part of me and part of my spiritual self. And so it was through the practice of meditation, that was the very first practice that I engaged in, that basically changed the course of my life. And it allowed me to go inward and discover my inner being versus my outer being. And most of us are just living connected to our outer being. We identify with our outer being, and that was me too. I had lost myself in the living of my life, trying to be the perfect mom, perfect wife, perfect daughter, perfect daughter-in-law, perfect friend, perfect employee, perfect lots of different things that I didn't even know who I was, wearing many different masks, who I needed to be at work, who I needed to be at home, who I needed to be with my family, who I needed to be with his family, who I needed to be with my friends. It was awful. And so it was only until I started to really connect with my truth, and your truth is really your authentic self. It's none of the masks that we wear all the time, that I realized I wasn't living authentically. And what was missing and what I had been searching for my entire life was already inside me. I just didn't know how to connect with it.
That is such a profound path, because a lot of us probably have been around others who have recognized that something is missing, and then think, well, and I've been told to my face when I've started to go through my journey that I've shared with you, oh, you're just having a midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And let it go. Like, it felt very condescending. And in my mind, I thought, I've been on the path of this soul searching for as long as I can remember, but the pain has become the catalyst now.
Mm-hmm.
And often and I'm not saying just Western, maybe it's all cultures have their level of this, but the self-care is supposed to be that band-aid that then makes you believe that, okay, I'm taking care of myself, and I'm then going to be a better person for myself and others. But it's often doesn't go as deep. Like, I love the fact you started with meditation, because moments ago when you and I were talking about those patterns, and you need to saturate yourself with information from the get-go all day, every time you're around anything. Well, it starts with meditation. The moment you get out of bed, just hitting the reset button and recognizing that you can go inward.
Rather than outward. We are outward focused, and happiness is, we're conditioned to believe it is outside of us, in our possessions, where we say things like, I'll be happy when I have that perfect, that car, that designer purse, whatever, that iPhone, whatever it is that that there's a whole consumerism around the products that we need in order to be happy. Our positions, titles, degrees. So I won't be happy until I make manager at work. I won't be happy until I get that promotion. I won't be happy until I graduate and I have those letters after my name. I won't be happy. In our experiences, I won't be happy until I go on that vacation. I won't be happy until, maybe I'm at at the gym or wherever we attribute our happy places to. I won't be happy until I find that perfect person. So it's in our relationships. So it's always outside, but happiness is an innate quality of our original self. Our essential self is always happy. So these other things that we do are just vehicles that help us to connect to a place inside of us that is always happy. So when people during the pandemic said, oh, how do you expect me to be happy when I can't go to the sports games, when I can't go to the networking events, when I can't go to parties, when I can't go to bars, when I can't go to the gym, when I can't hang out with friends, my happiness bubble goes wherever I go. Because those things, those activities, or those people are just a vehicle that's helping you to connect to a place inside of you that is always happy and happy in abundance. And oftentimes when we're engaging in those activities, whether it's cooking, drawing, writing, dancing, listening to music, walking our dog, playing with our kids, lots of beautiful activities, simple activities. Eating lunch, sometimes I'm like, oh, geez, this sandwich tastes so good. My morning coffee, like so good. And so it's like those moments where you're completely present and in the now. And that's where happiness is found. It's not found in the future, at some destination that's like 5 years from now when you arrive at like a certain position at work, or when you've paid off your mortgage or whatever you've set off. And when you've lost that 10 pounds, then I'll go ahead and love myself and be happy somehow. Or, stuck in the past where you're wallowing in your mistakes and your regret and the things that didn't work out for you. Happiness is here. And when we are in those activities, oftentimes we're connected to it. And that's why we think it's the activities, but it's really us connecting to that place. So we can connect to that place at any moment. And for me, oftentimes it is just a matter of disconnecting from the outside, where I close my eyes, that I give myself like a sensory repose, let's say. And I'm like, okay, I need to go inward and connect with that place of peace inside of me, or that place of love inside of me, that place of joy inside of me. And then you open your eyes and it's like, okay, you can now bring that forth into everything that you do.
Absolutely. And you are, by going inwards, what you're allowing yourself to do, if you think of yourself as pure energy, is you're meeting with that vibrational level so that you are in that higher state of vibration. Because the moment I will open up my eyes, given that I have a peaceful life, I have conditions around me that are in my favor, but nonetheless, there are things that can happen through the day. Even the morning, I received an email from someone, and I noticed just as and I shouldn't have opened the email over my iPhone, but I did. And it was just before I sat down for my meditation, and my heart was racing, because what was being expressed in the email was a very harsh tone. And I had to bring myself down. And suddenly I realized after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm like, oh, I was getting flustered.
And thank goodness that you are cognitive of the communication, that all those aspects of yourself were communicating with you, that your physical self, all of a sudden you're like, oh, my heart is racing. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm feeling like anxious or flustered or frustrated or sad or whatever, right? That our physical self starts to respond to it. And then there's your emotional self that then starts to say things to you too. And that our emotional self is always, I believe, acts as a compass that helps us to lead us towards our happiest life. Because if we check in with our emotions and we ask ourselves, am I happy in this moment? Am I enjoying what I'm doing right now? And we constantly just checking in. And if we're not, that gives us an opportunity to redirect. So those negative emotions are really there only because of that duality that we have here on this planet. But that duality constantly allows us to realize what we do really want and what really does make us happy, and the life that we really want to be living versus the one that we're not living. So we should be tuning in to those emotions all the time because they're constantly speaking to us, but they're there as a sign to say you're not in alignment right now. When you're frustrated or you're in fear or you're in anxiety, you're not in alignment, because our truth is peace. So if you're feeling anxious or depressed, that's not in alignment. Something is off there. So what steps do you need to take? And that's where the mental self should be a slave to the heart, where the mental self says, okay, how can I change this situation? I need to avoid those people because every time I'm with them, they're like toxic. So I don't feel good when I'm with, and you know, those people, you're like, I don't feel good when I hang out with those people. So your mind has to figure out, well, how can I limit, if not, my interaction with them, or not interacting with them at all anymore. So our mind should be, instead of us being more rational, which is often what we do, we go to the mind to figure things out, but we should actually be going more to the heart to figure things out. And then our mind responds more to that.
Absolutely. And you're probably aware of heart math and the power of the heart. I just finished a series in June called Heart Centered Awareness, where I the culmination of all of that information was scientific to some degree, because I believe that at the end, and I'm still working on this, because our Western culture, I believe, to survive, often required for me to become so cerebral to the point where the heart is suppressed. But when the heart is in command, when you learn to train the heart to say, speak your voice, and then tell the heart, mind to where to go, that's where the alignment starts. Then the spirit gets to come into play as well.
Thank you so much for saying that's exactly right. And that's why it's important that we go to that first, listening to that communication, because it's constantly speaking to us, right? Whether we call it our intuition, our gut instinct, it is our inner being, and that inner being is connected to divine intelligence. It is connected to your higher self that knows the life that you came here to live. And it's constantly giving us guidance. But as you said, we're so, again, conditioned to always say, well, what do you think? And what do you think? And oftentimes it's, what do you think? Asking everybody else, what do you think? Instead of going inward and asking your higher self, your inner being, what direction I need to take. And that communication is difficult if you're in maybe a really busy setting, a really loud setting, that it may be harder. But the more you practice, the more you're connected, the more, as I said, I'm in my happiness bubble everywhere that I go. And I hear that little voice that's like super tiny, that's always trying to talk to you and guide you. It becomes louder and louder and louder and louder the more you open yourself up to listening to that voice. And so now I don't have to be at the meditation center. I don't have to be, doing the yoga. I don't have to have maybe all of the things that people set out, the crystals and the incense and the candle and the music. I don't need any of those things. I can really just be anywhere and be able to tap in and listen to that guidance.
That guide, and that is exactly where that's the ultimate goal. I believe, as to truly live the human experience in a peaceful way, with peace. And one thing that you mentioned, it was so interesting. Here's my take on, moments ago, you said something about that negative emotion, that information that you're receiving. And suddenly a light bulb went off on my head. I'm like thinking, what if we think of negativity or negative information like that looping, perhaps in a positive way, saying, okay, I hear you. And I could put a label on you saying, you're this type of information, perhaps cultural conditioning or societal or ego, and put it aside. But it could be negative and heart warning you, or negative in intuition giving you more information. And either way, yes, the negative stuff can really bring you down, but if you learn to control it with the mantras and meditation, and then accept the inner compass, then what is that negativity telling you?
Yeah, what is it telling you, right? It's exactly either of those two things that you just said. Either it's a warning that's saying like, hey, you need to like be aware of this. And then, but again, it's about checking in, right? Because sometimes that intuition is trying to prevent us from getting hurt. And I listened to different stories where people didn't listen to that intuition, right? And then ended up having some kind of unfortunate negative consequence to not listening to like that. Said, no, don't take the shortcut tonight, go the long way. Or no, don't go that route, go this way tonight. And, I had an experience like that about like 2 months ago where, and I live in a pretty small, quiet, like I would say safe community. But the moment I left my home that night on my walk, and it was late, but usually it's fine, I didn't feel good the moment I left. And I kept like looking over my shoulder going, it's so weird. Like, why do I feel like someone is following me? And, as my walk went along, other weird stuff started happening. And there was a possibility of me being hurt along my walk that night. I had to get my son to come and pick me up. I was like, I shouldn't have gone. I should have just listened, because that the whole time I was being, my intuition was like, but I'm like, but it's fine, right? This is what your mind does. It's fine. It's okay. You walk, lots of times you walk at night. It's good. It's like, and then it was like, no, Teresa, you should not have gone. And so we often neglect it. So it's important that we do like listen to it and say, is this trying to warn us? Is this trying to keep us safe? Or is it also just trying to direct us and realign us back to our truth? So if we are feeling frustrated and angry and whatever emotions a situation may have brought up for us, what steps can we take to return us back to that love, peace, and happiness? That we don't stay there, right? We don't unpack our bags and stay there.
And I can attest that learning to tune into my intuition has been a journey, because while it's there and it's always there, again, it could be conditioning from external factors, Western society, what have you. It's not always something that I tune into effectively enough. But when we were talking about this concept of thinking, I believe that intuition is a different kind of thinking. It's coming from the heart and soul as opposed to the thinking mind. And when you were expressing your story of going on that walk and knowing that your intuition is speaking to you, the challenge is the mind will often say, well, do you see the red lights? Do you see a booming voice? Because until we get those explicit factors, often it's hard to accept that we're getting information that's valid.
Yeah. And especially when it's kind of out of the ordinary, right? Like that situation was like, well, it's fine. It's usually okay, but we shouldn't ignore it. And same thing with those hunches where maybe we should do something out of the ordinary, right? That you're being guided maybe to make that left-hand turn instead of like going the usual route. And then you end up like saving yourself like a ton of traffic or something. Your GPS says like, no, go this way. And then you're like, well, maybe I don't know why I feel like I need to go this way. And then you go, and then you're like, thank God, because there's like all the cars are all piled up on the other side or something like that. So we are always being guided, but the more we practice that connection, the louder it gets, and it just becomes easier to follow. And your life just becomes better and better and better when we do that. There are synchronicities that happen all the time, that I feel like there are good opportunities that flow into my life more and more and more, the more that I tap into and are connected to that part of myself. I believe I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. So I believe I'm spirit first in this human body. having the experience that I came here to have on a soul level, to learn the things that I came here to learn and to experience, that it's going to help me to grow and expand, that's what our soul is constantly doing, learning, growing, and expanding. That's just what it does. And so it's enjoying that, but connected to my spiritual self. And I think that, as you said, when you think of all of the ascended masters, so those sages over time, Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad and Mother Mary and lots of different ones that were connected to their spiritual self first, they ended up being examples for us with how to live in peace and forgiveness.
I just couldn't have expressed it more profoundly. Yes, everything you expressed. And I would love for people to connect with you, because you're a living example. You went through the journey. You recognize the signs along the way, and you were able to help yourself. And I love the idea, or the metaphor you used, of the happiness bubble. That is what we all need and want. And it's life can be so much more joyful and smoother when we learn to live in that bubble.
Yes, I totally agree. Yes, thank you for that. And so I'm the founder of a company called The Steps to Happiness. So my brand is very much about what steps, what principles and practices can we take and follow in order for us to live the happy life we came here to live. We didn't come here to be miserable. And if we are, it's because we're not living the life that we came here to live. If you feel like things are off and maybe you are depressed, that I believe on a really deep soul level, you're not living the life you came here to live. You're in a job and a situation and in a life that is very opposite the life you came here to live. And on a deep, it's a deep level, it's not a conscious level, that it's almost like you're spiritually wounded. You can't be. That part is always whole, healed, and complete. But it's almost like you're not honoring that for, whether it's cultural expectations, right? Religious expectations for, well, you should do that just because it's family business and that's what you need to do. Or, that's what everyone in our culture gets married at 23 to a stranger and has kids right away. And how that's maybe your path, but that's a path that I came here, wanted to carve for myself and to live out and experience, right? So it's important that we recognize that guidance, and our emotions are helping us with that. All aspects are helping. Our mental self is helping, our physical self too. We don't feel good, as you said, that dis-ease in the body. Our body is always telling us too when we're not in alignment with our truth, which is, again, that love, peace, and happiness, that wholeness, that perfection that we always are.
I agree with everything you said. I just so deeply enjoyed the way you articulated all the nuances. And there's so many steps that one can take. So that's why I'm excited for people to discover your course and your workshop. And as you were expressing moments ago about when you are in that state of learning to practice, because I do believe in some degree it's a daily practice to stay in alignment and to remain in that happiness state, that things do flow. The synchronicity does occur. And I've noticed it more and more in my life. Maybe it was even there when I wasn't noticing it. But now that I'm more cognizant, and even just coming across your information, pure serendipity. And I was so excited. I was looking for someone with your expertise, and lo and behold, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And all of the steps that I've taken are ones that I've done on my own. So when you said about coaching practice and workshops, there's an amazing workshop that I'm offering right now at the moment, but I know this is going to air sometime in the future. So it's ongoing, but it's called Mental Freedom. And it's a 6-week program that gives people the tools they need to help themselves. And so all of it could be that that's just I feel like it's part of my path that I have been brought various like practitioners, but with like information that has allowed me to work on myself in the privacy of my own home, on my own. So EFT, for example, I've never, if you've heard of emotional freedom technique, it was like I went to a conference, and then Nick Ortner was the speaker, and I was like, oh, buy my book, and I buy his book, and I worked through it on my own, and I practiced that for 4 months every day on my own without having to tell anybody, my deep dark secrets. And I could do it as many times as I needed to over and over again. And so a lot of the practices I talk about on my shows, so I have 2 different shows, the Steps to Happiness show, as well as the Happy Hour with Teresa Greco. And those are available on a variety of platforms, on YouTube, on the websites, on all the podcast platforms, on Roku TV. So there's access to the steps, where that's what my guests and I, we talk about the different steps that we can take to really align, to connect and nurture all aspects of ourselves, our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self, because it does require that we are constantly working on all aspects. Otherwise, how can we be whole if we're only working on our mental self, right? When we're like, oh, it's mental health month. Well, you can't just work on your mental self without also incorporating the other aspects. It doesn't work. It's like there's like pieces of the puzzle, pieces of the pie that are missing unless we're also integrating the other parts of us. So, and my coaching practice and the workshops are always very much about those steps that people can take to help themselves, that they don't have to feel like, and not to, to discount going to a practitioner or a therapist or a doctor or anything like that. But for those that feel like they just don't have the tools to manage the circumstances in their life, whether it's like past stuff that keeps cropping up or just like the new situations that pop up, these are practical tools that you can apply that give you that emotional intelligence. Really, it's like understanding your emotions in that moment, or your thoughts and behaviors, and being able to apply a practical tool to them to be able to give you more mental freedom, more peace, more joy in your life.
And one of the things I try to tune into for all of my podcasts and every month is the science behind that spirituality and the practical techniques. Because at the end of the day, if this mission that I feel I have and you have can be lived through and fulfilled, it needs to be practical, because we live in a society where right now, often people are maybe disconnected, but this notion of feeling happiness feels like, oh, I have to do those esoteric woohoo things to get there. And that's not necessarily true.
No, it's not though. It's a part of ourselves. It's like happiness is like your arm, like it's a part of you. You just have to make time to connect with it through a vehicle of whatever that is for you, whether it's walking out in nature, whether it's hiking, whether it's swimming, whether it's exercising, whether it's listening to that playlist of songs that make you happy, whether it's cooking, whether it is hanging out with particular people, playing with your kids, walking your dogs. There's an endless amount of things that help us to be in the present moment, to be here now and be completely mindful of that present moment, where when you're at a concert or a sporting event, you're there having the best time. Why? Because you're not thinking about your problems. You're not thinking about, your past shame and regret, or the things you have to do later, or the things that you're scared of, right? There's so much fear mongering out there that also makes people anxious and stressed out and uncomfortable. So that's why we feel so good. And we think, oh yeah, I just need more of this. You do need more of those activities. And I call it part of your happiness toolkit. These are things that we put into our toolkit that we know we can turn to as soon as we start to feel out of alignment. And I know when I'm out of alignment, I usually get headaches. I'm foggy. I have a hard time like making decisions. My shoulders hurt, my neck hurts, my lower back. Like my body's like, Teresa, you've overworked yourself. You've taken on too many responsibilities. You're feeling overwhelmed. You didn't sleep enough. you didn't eat enough healthy foods, you had too much alcohol, like whatever, you didn't drink enough water, lots of different things. And so we're supposed to listen to that and say, okay, what steps now can I take to realign myself? And using our spiritual self that is always whole, healed, and complete to nourish us. So it's in those moments of frustration, it's in those moments when our life feels chaotic, that we come to that place within ourselves as soon as we can, to get centered, to get aligned, to get grounded, and then be able to do all of the things, come out of that place from that centered place within ourselves.
And centered as well as from a holistic perspective, because it sounds like you're very aware that it's not just the mind work, it's not just the physical work, it's a host of tools.
Host of tools. Yeah, just like when I think we started off about the self-care, it's more than just, you know, at the very beginning of our conversation, you mentioned about the self-care. That's only one part. Self-care is just us taking care of our physical self. But what about the other aspects? What are you doing to nurture and connect with those aspects? So it does require that we're always paying attention to all of it. That even meant like, yes, mentally, if we're thinking happy thoughts and we're looking to the positive, and we're, you know, trying to be positive with our thinking, that it does elicit positive emotions. So our thoughts, it usually starts with our thoughts, and it gets triggered, our emotions get triggered, and then our behaviors, and our behaviors then create some action, or sometimes habits too. So it is important that we think about, when we feel something, what thoughts did we have beforehand that elicited that response, that emotional or physical response. So just going back to your email this morning, it was the email that triggered that. So then you're like, well, maybe I won't check my emails till after I meditate, because after I meditate, it may not bother me as much. And so and that's what happens when you do the work. These situations happen, and it's like they don't bother you. Like even when I'm driving, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, there's going to be all this traffic. Right away, I'm like, okay, I'm going to put on my songs that I like to listen to, or I'm going to turn on my podcast that I want to listen to. And then I'm like coasting there. I'm like, I don't even care if like I get out of this traffic, because I'm like enjoying my audiobook so much that it doesn't even matter. And so these things will happen, but it's like you're on your high flying disc. For those that like listen to Abraham Hicks, right? You're vibrating up here, that even if I dip just a little, and then I'm up again, and then I might dip, and then I'm up again. So there isn't this roller coaster of emotions. When you practice the work, it's like you're up here most of the time, and in your happiness bubble, it's just floating around up here. Even like, here's all the muck down there, I'm like, la 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 la. Yeah. I'm floating above it all.
Absolutely. And so funny that you almost this entire conversation, 90%, it's like I wouldn't even have to talk, because you're really resonating on a frequency exactly what I'm thinking and feeling. And so to the point where when you started saying, well, I'm traffic and I listened to such, I suddenly was like, I'm going to tell Teresa about my example, that I have this desire to always stay productive. So the other day I did what I often do. I'm in the kitchen washing dishes and mopping the floor and all this, and like, I'm going to turn on Abraham Hicks in the background so that I'm at least getting saturated with the positive high-flying disc information.
It's true. And I will often, same thing, I'm cooking dinner, although I don't mind cooking, so sometimes I won't, but sometimes if I'm engaged in a task that maybe, it's something I feel like I have to do versus, what I may want to be doing. And then I turn on the songs that I like to listen to, or some kind of audiobook or a podcast, and I'm listening to that. And then I'm doing, what I need to, but I'm not even paying attention to it. So I don't even allow the task that maybe would have been kind of upsetting to me. It doesn't even touch me, because I'm totally immersed in this other stuff.
Yeah.
That's so filling.
And unconsciously or consciously, you are reprogramming, going back to the biggest villain in my life is often the thing between the ears, which is the thing that often will send old messages that I need to reprogram.
Yeah, yeah. And I know, because I think this episode is entitled what, Happy Mind? But now you know that it's much more than just the mind.
Absolutely. It's much more than the mind. I'm so glad you recognize that, because I know that the title doesn't do it justice.
But it's often how Western culture talks about happiness. They see it all the time. Happiness is a state of mind. Happiness is a state of mind. I'm like, no, happiness is much more than just a state of mind. That's just our mental self. What about the other three aspects?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Holistic. And I always feel of it as like it's holistic. Well, Teresa, I really hope that I can bring you back again. And I look forward to looking at your content and just further conversations just on this topic when you have time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a delight. Thank you.
It's been a delight. Have a really great day.
Thank you, you too.
Thanks for tuning in, sweet soul. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful for your kind review on Apple Podcast. Simply click on the link in the show notes to leave your lovely feedback and uplift our spirits. Your support means the world to me and helps our show thrive. So please show me your love and continue to practice Omni Mindfulness.